Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Deandra Brooks, and I work in the FAA's UAS Integration Office. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Superman? Maybe. Across the country, drones are changing the way we work and live, especially for first responders. With more and more public safety agencies using drones, what are the best practices and available resources? Here to answer these questions and more is our awesome panel. But before we get started, a few housekeeping items. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you can't stay for the whole program, you can watch a recording of this webinar on the FAA's YouTube channel. This is a very short program, so we will only be answering a few audience questions during the webinar. You can submit your questions in the comment section on YouTube or Facebook and through replies on Twitter. We have staff monitoring these platforms. Now, let's meet today's panel. Kerry Fleming has been employed by the FAA for over 35 years. He spent 20 years as an air traffic controller in Bridgeport, Connecticut before coming to headquarters. Kerry is now the manager of the System Operations Support Center, which is a component of the FAA's Airspace Security Group. Mark Colburn is a retired reserve senior corporal for the Dallas Police Department Air Support Unit / UAS Squad. He began building and flying small drones in 2012 and went on to help start the Dallas PD's drone program. Mark also serves on the FAA's Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. Mike O'Shea is a program manager in the FAA's UAS Integration Office, where he serves as liaison, facilitator, and resource for both public and civil unmanned aircraft integration efforts. Prior to joining the FAA, Mike managed law enforcement aviation technologies for the Department of Justice and spent 15 years as a uniformed law enforcement officer. Chief Richard Fields is a 28-year veteran of the Los Angeles City Fire Department. He holds the rank of Deputy Chief. He brought forward the idea of integrating drone technology into the LAFD response matrix in 2015, and the rest is history. Scott Harris is a special agent with the FAA's Office of National Security Programs and Incident Response, Law Enforcement Assistance Program, or LEAP. He is also a member of the U.S. Air Force Reserve 312th Airlift Squadron at Travis Air Force Base in California. My first question is for our first responders. Mark and Richard, both of you were involved in setting up your respective drone programs. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first pitched the idea of bringing drones into your response toolbox? Richard, I'll start with you. Well, we don't have Richard, so why don't we go to Mark? Mark, what do you wish that you knew now, or you knew when you first started your drone program that you know now?
Well, when we first got started, we chose some of the wrong drones, and we were kind of in a hurry to get everything going, and we had this request come down from downtown to say, hey, let's get this request in for these things, and we brought some what were they, the duals, and with the 380 camera and with FLIR camera, and we wish we hadn't bought those. But for the most part, we tried to set it up the way that was recommended by Grand Forks and Mesa County Sheriff's Department in Colorado and some of the other agencies that already started. So we kind of wish we had asked for more ancillary equipment, like extra things that we need. Like when you start a program, you need like vehicles, you need support equipment, and you need some way to stream your video to the commanders. And that was kind of slow coming. So we kind of wish that we got a little bit more of a head start on that stuff, because buying drones, you can't just buy drones and give them to the guys and say, hey, go out there and go to work. You need all this other stuff as well.
So having the right equipment. Richard,
Exactly.
Richard, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first pitched the idea to bring drones into your fire department?
We were fortunate that we really took a crawl first and walk second and run after that approach to building our program. But I would have to kind of dovetail on Mark's comment, really understanding what it means to sustain the program, especially when you're looking at funding sources, not only the equipment that you need to buy, you may be able to keep a particular drone for, for several years or several cycles, but batteries, propellers, all of the ancillary equipment that he's talked about, vehicles to transport that. And that all goes into your sustainability plan. Like, it's great to get it and have it for, the first couple years. But, knowing that, you're going to have an accident, you're going to crash, you're going to damage equipment. If the program is going to, especially when you're promising that, integrating UAS into your operational matrix is going to solve a particular problem, sustainability of that program is critical so that you can deliver on those promises. So I certainly, the sustainability piece, and then, obviously, really solidifying and clearly defining roles and responsibilities inside the team. Who's going to be responsible for what? Who is that point of contact for particular information? It was critical for us in communicating with the FAA when we were dealing with our COA and things like that. We had to have point people who were versed in the subject to be responsible for communicating to the FAA and other agencies to manage our program as we move forward.
So you mentioned the FAA. Let's go to someone that I'm sure everyone who's tuned in knows, and that's Mike O'Shea. So Mike, I know that you talk to a lot of first responders starting new drone programs. What advice do you give them?
Well, we understand that starting a new program is daunting for a lot of public safety agencies, and they're coming from an arena where they're not in aviation, they're in public safety. So what we try to do is try to be helpful. We try to make sure that there are a lot of people we can connect them with to help them with their programs, to assist them with starting with their programs. We also try to look to see if there's other public safety agencies we can partner them with that are in their areas that might be able to provide them support and assistance, because sometimes peer-to-peer is better than talking, peer to the federal government. We also talk a lot about licensing and registration and some of the regulatory requirements for the operations they need to conduct. And then as you can see, post on the screen, there's a lot of good online resources they can get from the public safety. And we work with our partners within the FAA, the LEAP program, our Office of Communications, the Systems Operations Support Center, to develop products that can assist them with their programs, both starting their programs and maintaining their programs as they go forward.
Okay, you mentioned that phrase, LEAP. Scott, tell us, what does a LEAP agent do and how do they help public safety agencies?
Yeah, well, from an enforcement standpoint, assistance that is needed by public safety and law enforcement. We're generally dealing with law enforcement, federal, state, local, and tribal, where they need assistance in enforcing their code. When I say their code, applicable code that their agency has purview and that they will enforce. And so the LEAP program, Law Enforcement Assistance Program, LEAP, there are approximately 30 LEAP agents geographically located across the country, and they're your plug-in point for resources. Mike's group, or Mike had talked about on the web page, there's a lot of good resources there with starting a program. Also, there's a lot of good resources for enforcement and how this works when you're talking about applicable code, authorities, and that whole the enforcement process. And so LEAP can assist you in that. One thing that we do a lot are outreach and training. And it's not just for UAS or drones, it's for all things aviation, where law enforcement and public safety would need assistance in the enforcement side of things. And so LEAP agent can come out and specifically zero in on a topic or an element and provide an outreach briefing to increase awareness about that and talk about resources and reporting as well. How do you report these incidents when you believe that there's non-compliance? How does that, from a law enforcement or public safety perspective, how does that get reported to the FAA? And we can talk about that. And so if you haven't met your LEAP agent, or you don't know who your LEAP agent is in your area, I encourage you to reach out, and on the screen there, you can certainly send an email there. We have a LEAP POC map that is specifically for law enforcement that has every LEAP agent's email address and cell phone number on. And so basically can provide that plug-in point to the FAA resources, and your LEAP agent is your, being introduced and understanding who your LEAP agent is that first point and plug-in point for you.
That's great. Carrie, how does the FAA's System Operations Support Center assist first responders with drone programs? Why does everyone seem to have your telephone number on speed dial?
That's because Mike O'Shea blasted it all over social media and probably took out ads in newspapers and billboards. No, seriously, it's because we're the group that is responsible for helping first responders get airborne immediately. A lot of first responders know the process of getting their drone program up and running and getting COAs and going through drone zone and things of that nature. But there's a lot of incidents that happen that require a time critical emergency response. And you don't have time to go through the drone zone. And sometimes Lance is not going to be effective for those same operators. For the ones out there that know about it, Lance is around certain airports that give grid altitudes to anybody who wants to fly in there, who has a reason to fly in there. But there's a lot of times where there's a situation comes up and they have to respond immediately, and it's above one of those altitudes, or it's in restricted airspace, or there's some other complication to what they need to do to operate their drone safely and to respond to the incident. So you would call my group, the Systems Operations Support Center, and our phone number should be on there, but I'll say it anyway. It's 202-267-8276. And we're all, we're a small group, I'll say that, and we all have decades of experience in air traffic. And that's important because we understand airspace. So when you call us and you have a situation, or you email us and you need immediate access to airspace, we know exactly who to go to and to mitigate whatever concerns air traffic might have, such as an active runway or the proximity to the airport or proximity to other types of operations in the area. We will work with them. We will either give you an approval off your initial response, or we'll tell you that it may be a little bit different in terms of, say, altitude or the circumference of the area that you need to operate in, or you need to go beyond visual line of sight. We will work all that out, sometimes in a matter of minutes. So that's why we're probably the most popular and well-liked group in the FAA. No, I'm kidding. We're here to do a job. We're here to assist you.
It's not a competition, Carrie.
Seriously. Thank you.
But Carrie's group is here to assist our public safety agencies and people working those emergencies. I know that his team is just, they can do some amazing things to help facilitate that response. But I want to talk best practices. So Mark, you guys have been using drones for a while. What kind of best practices do you see starting to emerge?
Well, some of the best practices I think folks should use, or departments should use when they're starting a drone program, is make sure that you get the public buy-in. So you want to go to your city council members first and your county commissioners and get their support, and then get the media on board. I know a lot of police officers are not very happy with the media in a lot of cases, but you can use them to be your friend. You can you get in with some media folks, and that, you know, reporters are just like cops. They go out and they cover things that are happening out there. They're putting their, you know, in a lot of cases, they're putting their life on the line by standing out on the street corner doing a live report. So, you know, in a lot of ways, what they do is similar to what we do. They work odd hours and that sort of thing. They can be one of your best sources of friends and you want that public buy-in. And also another thing too is you want to make sure that you know, these drones are not toys, okay? And you've got to instill in your folks that these are aircraft, and you got to treat them like aircraft. So that means get in that aviation mindset before you take off. You know, do your checklists, make sure things are right. Every time I've ever put a drone into the ground or into a tree or something like that, I wasn't following. You know, I just wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. And really, that's the most important part. So, you know, I flew helicopters for Dallas for 30 years and then retired. And then we started a drone program. And I try to employ those same principles that I use every time I go fly and apply that to flying my drone. There should be no different. You know, I'm aware of the airspace and make sure that everything's set up. You know, my drone marks its position before it takes off, so it'll come back. If something goes wrong, you lose communications with it, and you will lose communication, especially if you're flying in a city in a high Wi-Fi environment. You're going to lose contact with that drone at some point, and so you want it to be able to, you want it to come back to where it took off. And let's see. Oh, another thing too, on our department, we require all of our pilots. We're kind of a unique situation because most departments, flying a drone is an extra duty. Okay, so in other words, patrol officer, they give the patrol officer a drone, and he goes to the scene and he throws it up for whatever call that they're working on. But we have 4 or 5 dedicated officers here in Dallas that's all they do is drone stuff. And so that's kind of nice for us. But one of our requirements, just like the helicopter squad, to get into is you have to have a FAA private helicopter rating. In the drone squad, we have to have a Part 107. And I think that just adds that extra layer of you know, expertise. And also, you know, it shows that, hey, they really want to be out here and do this, okay, and prove that, you know, it's not just a fun extra, you know, a fun job for them on the department. So really, that's those are some of the best practices I think that units, anybody who's thinking about starting a unit should probably adopt is stuff along that lines.
So Richard, what about you? Are you seeing any other different best practices starting to emerge?
Mark hit on some really good points. Certainly adopting an aviator's mindset in your when you're operating a drone, you know, for that very reason. And I would say one, standardization. Here in my region in California, you know, we have 31 different fire and police agencies, and everyone wants to fly a drone. But as you know, as the you know, the aviators in the room, you know, and Mark or, you know, anyone else on the call, but have a pretty good idea that if they're sitting next to another aviator, they have a good idea of how they were trained, you know, how many hours they had to fly to get to a certain level. That's one thing we don't have it in the drone world yet. So when we're talking about working collaboratively across agencies locally, especially in my area where we interact with state and federal agencies, we need to get that standardization piece really locked down, because it comes back to the confidence that our staffed aircraft aviators have in each other. They know what that next helicopter pilot or the next fixed wing pilot is probably going to do when we're in the same airspace. They don't have that confidence with the drone operators. So we are fortunate to have an aircraft, you know, division, and we've worked really hard at developing those relationships. And I think that relationship building is critical in our environment, period. You know, if we're trying to figure out who's who and the name and the face at the time of the emergency, we're way behind the curve. So it's really about building those relationships, building the expectations on both sides prior to the emergency, prior to the call out, that become critical in allowing us to be able to really utilize the resource. Because if you know, air operations on a wildfire, and the air operations branch director is not familiar with drone operations, they're not going to allow drones to fly. And then that means that incident or that, you know, that emergency can't benefit from that resource. Really critical there. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, again, in that relationship and making sure that, you know, drones are just a force multiplier. They don't have the ability to replace staffed aircraft. They don't. They're not going to do hoist operations. They're not going to do major water drops, but they are a force multiplier. And really developing those relationships throughout the drone and aviation community, I think are going to be critical. And then I certainly will reiterate what Mark said. Really having standardized training, and then making sure that at the very least, and that's what we've always been a proponent of, not only operating under your COA, but that every operator should be Part 107 licensed pilot. It really adds to the confidence of the training in an individual pilot and in that organization that's sponsoring it.
Well, it's
Andrew,
funny.
Can I add a few things to that?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, make sure if you're going to start a program, get your policies in place first. That's very important. And also, you know, let me read you the first line from our Patrol Bureau SOP. It says the primary mission of the UAS squad is the collection and dissemination of critical information during dynamic incidents to increase officer safety, enhance situational awareness, and decrease unplanned uses of force to gain control over fleeing and actively resisting suspects. So that's one thing that you can use to sell your program and say, hey, this is an officer safety thing. This is going to help. And also on the fire side too, hey, this is going to help our guys out. It's going to maybe even save lives. And we're in Dallas, we're using the DJI minis for building searches and for dynamic entries with SWAT, because and it's really we're getting to where we're working hand in hand with SWAT because they're using them, and they really like sending that drone in first, so they know what's going on inside that house, and it's been a real game changer for us. So, like I say, get your general orders in place and your SOPs and all that before you start everything, so there's no question as to what's going to happen when you get your program started. Okay, I'll toss it back to you. Thank you.
So it's funny because Richard mentioned something that came in from a question from one of the social platforms, and that is, do first responders need the FAA Part 107 certificate, or is this not needed because it's commercial? So Mike, I know you've answered this question before. I'm going to kick it over to you.
So if you're flying under Part 107, yeah, you do have to have a Part 107 license. If you're flying as a public aircraft operation, you're not required to have a Part 107, but you have to have a program that demonstrates the ability and documented training that show that you have the ability to fly that aircraft safely in the national airspace. And I know a lot of agencies, the way they meet that requirement is by having their officers get that Part 107.
And if I could add to that, Mike, you know, we speak to it as, yeah, it's not required, but it's highly, 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 highly recommended. And here's why. There are operations that say if you're flying under your Part 107, you technically shouldn't be flying over people. However, under your COA attached to an emergency, you're able to do that. So there are operations that are critical to my fire department to be able to operate that COA, where you're not quite flying under the protection of your COA, but being a Part 107 pilot in addition adds that additional layer where, you know, and it adds to the credibility of the individual operator. So while not absolutely required, you're leaving your back door open if you don't have it. And, you know, with the constant scrutiny that we're all under, why do that if you can avoid it?
Yeah, Danner, can I add something? We in Dallas, we adopted the NIST, the National Institute of Safety and Training standard, the BPERP test, the basic proficiency test, where it uses buckets to you fly around these buckets and you do all these maneuvers up and down and left and right, camera up and down, and it's a great tool to help our guys build what I call the thumbology. Okay, in other words, shaking the sticks, because anybody can send one of these new GPS drones up in the air and put it over a scene and just let it sit there and zoom in with a camera and stuff. But actually doing close-in work and flying inside, you really have to have those motor skills for this, and that the BPERP is excellent for that. So we make that as a requirement, that you have to pass that BPERP within the 10 minutes time frame as part of our program also. So we really like it, and I'm a proctor. I went to the school down at one point and learned how to actually proctor the test. So it's not, NIST is not really a adopted standard. The Airborne Public Safety Association has decided to go ahead and certify people under the BPERP. So, but it's not, it's just a standard that you can train to. So if anything happens, you can go into court and say, hey, we've got this also. So I think that's important also for your program, to have that little extra layer of proficiency demonstration.
So training sounds like it's key for any program.
And anybody that we train goes through that program. We've trained Dallas Fire Rescue, we trained some Department of Homeland Security officers and stuff, and they all go through the same training along with our guys as well. And then we make it a yearly requirement too, that they have to go through it again.
So Carrie, this is something that you mentioned. It's something I heard Richard mention. What is a COA, and how is this a tool for public safety agencies?
Well, the COA is a certificate of airworthiness for their drone, for their program. They go through a process that flight standards and the UAS groups are involved in the authorization of them to operate it. And then for my group, where we come into play, is that we'll have some public operators that need to get into airspace. Let's say that they had a jurisdictional COA to operate in their jurisdiction, think, police department. So they could fly anywhere in there as long as it stays out of certain classes of airspace, but they get a call from a neighboring jurisdiction that they'll need to provide drone assistance. They'll contact us and we'll amend that portion of their COA that restricts where they can operate, and we'll provide them with that expanded approval so that they can go and assist with whatever is going on. Usually it's time critical and life-saving in a lot of times. And, it's one of the things that we've learned over the years, that we ask anybody who comes to us for any type of an approval, we'll ask them if they're a public operator, do they have a COA? A lot of times DOD will have COAs, and they'll need to get access to different kinds of airspace, or Part 107. And the difference is that a COA will actually amend a part in their COA, like I said, but a Part 107, you have different rules for that. So we'll just waive certain restrictions under the Part 107. If they need to fly beyond visual line of sight, they need to fly at night. And if they ask for lights out, that is a much bigger question that I'd rather not get into now, but it's not always easy. And we need to always constantly think on the fly and get this done within minutes a lot of times.
But Carrie, you make it all sound so easy. That's why everyone loves you, right?
I think that's it. But I can't do it by myself. I have a great team. One of them, Mike Sheldon, I've worked with him for 35 years. So I know that if he's the one on call, if he's answering the phone, I don't even have to think about it. But another person, Eric, I've worked with him for 15 years. He's been around forever. And actually all my group, they know how to respond. But every once in a while, we'll get a request that requires all of us to brainstorm, and it has to be done immediately, because whoever's on the other end of that call, that request, they may not have much time. And as flight standards knows, that every once in a while we may give an approval that gives them some margin, but we would rather help up front and then find out afterwards that perhaps there was a better way for us to approve a waiver or word it in such a way, but we're never going to do anything that's unsafe. So that's the bottom line.
Thank you for reiterating that. So, Richard, I know that you had mentioned, drones are not here to replace personnel. It's a force multiplier. Can you, and Mark, then I'm going to punt this question to you as well. Can you think of a situation where you found drones to be uniquely useful for your operations?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll kind of give you. I mean, obviously, we know that helicopters for our area and any aircraft is very expensive to operate, very expensive to fly, fuel, and all the other things. And you have a fatigue factor for your pilots and certain regulations that go around that. In those gaps where those things become a factor is where the drone really shows its value. Where weather or air congestion or things like that, where you don't have equipment, say, not only high definition or zoom cameras capabilities on your staffed aircraft, but the ability to transmit that image. When you need that image for multiple people and you can't do that from a helicopter, that's where the drones show their value. One of the situations that were really solidified the force multiplier conversation, and really where our pilots, our aircraft pilots saw the value of the drones is on a wildland fire. We typically will drop water from the helicopter, and the pilot, all they can see from the ground, they don't see where they hit the ground until they, make that right hand or left hand turn. And they're listening to radio communication from the people on the ground as to whether or not that was a good, good drop. And that indication of a good drop is really, okay, I don't see any flame. It doesn't mean that it truly extinguished, that area. So we now have the drone launched at a particular location, usually a ridge over, but using the FLIR on that drop. Once that water hits that spot, they can now confirm, because you're looking at it through a thermal camera, whether or not it actually did the job. Do we need them to return and hit it again, and things like that? Hotspot, detection. We typically will, in the wildland arena, put boots on the ground and literally grid out an entire area to make sure that there are no hotspots, no chances of fires rekindling. Being able to put the drone into that aspect and remove the helicopter and not even have to use 4 or 5, say, engine companies or 20 people to do the work of one drone has been 2 of the areas where it's been where it's proved the force multiplier conversation. Can offer you a couple more, but in sake of time, it's really worked. Again, the thoughtful application of the drone proves that argument for us several times over.
I love the passion and excitement that starts to come through when you share these examples. Mark, what about you? How are drones uniquely positioned to really help with your operations?
Well, in a lot of cases, we've had a lot of protests in Dallas over the years, and the most recent one was the pro-abortion protests that we had after the Supreme Court decision. And where it really helps us is, our helicopters we have 3 now, but we only have 2 in service at the present time. And not having to have a helicopter up over that protest to monitor it the whole time really is saving us a lot in maintenance and time. So the helicopter squad can respond to the things that they need to out there to help the whole reason, why we're there is to help the officers on the ground. So, the more time that we can save to help them on certain things that they need, like active shooters and that sort of thing, and not have to monitor something as mundane, maybe as a protest. We use the drones for that. And sometimes we'll find some buildings downtown and we'll get up on the roof and we'll just launch from the roof, and it works really good. I spent the last time I went in and worked with the unit or with the squad, we spent 6 hours up on a roof flying various protests, and that way the guys, the helicopter squad doesn't have to go out and do that, and so they're kind of thankful for that. But remember, whenever you already have an existing aviation unit, okay, in your department, and you start something like this, there's going to be some pushback and there's going to be some problems, and we've experienced a little bit of that. There's a little bit of jealousy, and there's some guys that think, hey, I went out and spent $25,000 to get helicopter rating to get into this unit, and now these drones are going to take my job away. Well, I say to you guys, hey, I did this for 40 years. I flew helicopters for 40 years, and I don't think drones are going to take our jobs away anytime soon. Grand Forks Sheriff's Department found out, they did a study, they said about 30% of what a helicopter can do, we can do with a drone. So that's a pretty small number. I mean, you're not going to go out and fly chases and that sort of thing with drones. You really don't want to do surveillances, okay? Because that's you're getting into some gray areas there that might have some legal concerns. So, for that, it's not going to take the job away. You don't have to worry about the drones taking your job away. But I have one suggestion for anybody who's thinking about starting a program is stay when you get your program started and you have two programs like we do that are side by side, they're in the same hangar and they share space together. Stay in your lane. Don't worry about what the helicopter guys are doing. Don't worry about what the UAS squad guys are doing. Okay, just stay in your lane and just mind your own business. And I think that would help an awful lot. So. It would create, lessen some of the tensions that are going on. And you got, some older guys like me that, these drones, they're going to take our job away. But like I say, don't worry about it. It's not going to happen anytime soon. Maybe 20, 30 years down the road, perhaps, but I don't think we're going to see that for quite a while because the technology is progressing, but it takes a long time to do the rulemaking process. And, you saw how long it took to get the remote ID law into effect. And then it was challenged. And there were some very interesting things that came out of that decision. So, I think we're on track now to maybe move on to the BB-LOS stuff and get into that with some hard regulations, which is what I'd like to see next. But that's really, we're using them for other things too. When the helicopter's down, we'll respond to calls and go out and help the guys out on the street. And but remember, with the US squad, you've got to drive to the location, get set up. You got to do an assessment of what's in the area and flying, and you've got to assess your airspace and all that every time you move, and try to figure out a place to launch from where you keep an eye on the drone the whole time. So it's not the ideal solution that's going to replace the aviation squad. I know in Dallas, we can be anywhere in the city in 10 minutes in the helicopter from the ground. So you're not going to see that with the UAS squad, especially during the day with all the traffic. So, all right, let me toss it back to you.
So it is a big, wide world of aviation. Mike, everyone watching knows who you are. And Scott explained that everyone should know who their LEAP agent is. Is Mike frozen? It looks like Mike might be frozen. Okay, no, you're not. Okay. Mike, are there other offices or individuals public safety agencies should be connecting with at the FAA? We're a big agency. Who do they need to talk to?
Sure. And I think we probably need to go ahead and sing the praises again of your LEAP agent and the Systems Operations Support Center. And, I always tell people when I present, I always say, find out who your LEAP agent is, send them an email and say, the next time you're coming through our city or our county, please stop by so we can show you our program and make that connection. I also tell people, a great resource is Kerry and his folks in the Systems Operations Support Center. I think I'm their biggest cheerleader about how great they are. Both him and Scott do a fantastic work in supporting public safety. I also tell people that if there's a flight service division office, or we call them a FSDO, in their area, it's very important that they reach out to them and let them know what they're doing, what their operations are, so that they can help them out with their operations, answer questions they might have about rules and regulations. Obviously, they can contact me, and they can contact the person I work with, Steve Pansky. We'll help them with the COA and application process. There's also a lot of good public safety associations out there that they can reach out to that can help with stuff like standard operating procedures that Mark talked about and Chief Fields talked about. There are a lot of great resources out there. And then what we also recommend, there a lot of states now have done their own public safety associations for UAS operators. Find out who they are, join that group, make those contacts, learn from the people that are operating in the area where you live and work. And that's probably like I said before, peer-to-peer assistance is great. And there are a lot of good agencies out there that'll bend over backwards to help even small little agencies because they see the value of this technology.
So this has been fantastic. I know I've learned a lot today. One of the key things I learned is, build those relationships. Here at the FAA, we want to help you. Kerry and his group have a bunch of magic wands that they can wave to help. And there's a lot of resources out there available to any agency that wants to start a drone program. But the producers are telling me that we are out of time. I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing your experiences and insight. Today's discussion is part of our summer webinar series. Please join us on August 24th for Welcome to the Friendly Skies. For more information, check out our website, www.faa.gov/UAS. Thank you so much.